Hi everyone, geophysicist Stefan Burns. We have had a lot of seismic activity in the Pacific around Japan over the past few days. In fact, we just had a magnitude 6.3 earthquake strike east of the Philippines just minutes ago. I was already preparing to do a live stream on these Japanese earthquake swarms and the space weather connection. We have a negative polarity coronal hole on the sun, quite large, trans-equatorial, that's soon going to connect to the Earth with its high-speed stream of solar wind. And these are known as earthquake generators by some people. There's a pretty strong correlation between these specific space weather connections and conditions and earthquakes. We already have Japan swarming. Here's our wonderful Earth right there. We see these earthquake swarms on both to the north of Japan and to the south. And then, of course, right as I'm about to go live, 6.3, biggest earthquake we've had in some time, in the recent time frame. So this is now active as well, in addition to these earthquake swarms up here. And one interesting thing for people that have been following this is that there are there's actually multiple prophecies for July 5th of 2025 for there to be a high magnitude earthquake and like perhaps even volcanic event in between Japan and Philippines. And so I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not going to be surprised if it doesn't happen. It's just very interesting that right now, as we get closer and closer to that, we've started to have these earthquake swarms pop off on both sides of Japan, and now we get that 6.3 right there at the Philippines, basically showing a very large increase in seismic energy release for that area, that there have been at least two different prophets from the region who have been correct before with significant earthquake events. One was the magnitude 9.1 in 2011. That was the Japanese lady. She had these dreams and she forecasted that earthquake in one of her dreams. She saw it happen and then actually, it occurred. Magnitude 9.1 is a massive earthquake. And then there's also a prophet from Thailand, if you want to call him a prophet. There's just a person from Thailand that forecasted that magnitude 7.7 earthquake that hit Myanmar, Burma on March 28th of 2025. So just a few months ago. So they have a track record of, predicting this stuff, and both of them have identified that something is going to happen in between the Philippines and Japan this July. Take that with a huge grain of salt, drink a cup of salt water from the sea there. But in general, I find that kind of interesting, especially now that we have this activity here. I wasn't even really going to talk about the July 5th thing. I already have a live stream I made on that, just exploring into that with an open mind. I'll link that in the video description below. You can also sort my live streams by popular to see that one. It'll pop right up to the top. It says July 5th on that. But now that we've had this magnitude 6.3 there in the Philippines, right off the coast, something seems very, very interesting. So we have some significant space weather. We'll go back to the earthquakes. Let's go to, well, first off, before we even go any further, I don't know if there's a tsunami warning from that 6.3. Typically, you need bigger earthquakes for significant tsunamis. I don't have any updates here on our portal from the Meteorological Society from Australia, some group like that. The Australian Government Bureau of Meteorology. They don't have any updates for that 6.3, but it literally just occurred. So you're watching this right. There's still, there may even still be shaking. It's that, it's that soon. But let's go to our space weather. Let's check out this coronal hole because this is expected to give us a pretty significant geomagnetic storm. And that is going to likely hit us tomorrow. And what I have not mentioned yet is that we have Jupiter going Cazimi at this moment in time. So we have the Earth here, the Sun, and then Jupiter exactly 180 degrees opposite. Jupiter is the biggest planet in the kind of inner solar system. I mean, it's actually in the outer solar system at 5.2 AU or so on average. Inner solar system goes from Mars inwards. but Neptune goes all the way out to 30 astronomical units, for example. So Jupiter is actually pretty close, and it's the biggest planet. It's the most significant electromagnetic planet in terms of its magnetic field is very strong. It generates a lot of plasma. It has a very high orbital velocity. Its spin on its axis is the highest of all the planets. So it has a lot of the torque, you could say, of the solar system contained in its system. And that is exactly 180 degrees right now from the Earth. And just about 24 hours or less after that occurs, we have a new moon. And we see this increase, a statistically significant increase in earthquakes around new moons and full moons due to the line gravitational vectors. So we're going to have the Earth, the moon, the sun, and Jupiter all in that line tomorrow and even today. I'm reporting from Greensboro, North Carolina. This is June 23rd here, late at night, so it's probably the 24th, Universal Time. It is, and then it's 24th for a lot of people watching it. So right in that time frame, June 23rd, 24th, that's what's happening. Okay, here we have the sun. We just got through this coronal hole right here, but it's stacked down in the southern hemisphere. If you watch the channel, you know that I cover space weather. I cover what's happening with the Earth geologically, with like these earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and other factors. Also, I cover geophysical energies. For example, earthquakes often produce electromagnetic emissions. So we cover Schumann resonances and more. I discuss the connection between those. We also bring in cosmic forces. Just had some really interesting conversations at Cosmic Summit with some guys around my age who are doing some really novel research and connections into nova explosions in our local interstellar area and how that's affected perhaps Earth's climate and other things. So I'm excited to bring some of that information to you through the channel soon. So if you like all that, please subscribe. We also go into some of these other like more metaphysical and spiritual realms. But what we've been tracking on the channel now for quite a while are these coronal holes. We've been having a lot of them. And this one is transequatorial. So this was a big one, but it wasn't transequatorial, meaning it cuts through the equator. And this is significant because you have the ecliptic plane, which is the plane in between the sun and the Earth, right? The flat plane that exists. And what we see is that the magnetic field and the solar wind roughly travels along that ecliptic plane. And you also have an inward spiraling electric current coming in along the ecliptic plane, and you have outward flowing electric currents from the sun out of the polar regions. So you have the sun and you have these polar regions flowing out, and then they eventually reach down to the ecliptic plane. This could be out near the Oort cloud. We need to get these actual measurements, but it's pretty far out, likely much further than Neptune, Pluto, and the trans-Newtonian objects like Eris and Sedna and more. But eventually comes down and then flows in mostly along that ecliptic plane to connect back to the Earth. This is a negative polarity coronal hole. These coronal holes are open magnetic fields, and Earth has a positive polarity magnetic field in the current context of its orientation in relation to the sun. Some of these things are kind of arbitrary, you could say, but we've labeled this one negative, ours is positive, and you know what happens, you put the two together, you get that good connection. So not only is the magnetic field connection between this coronal hole what you want for there to be a connection, because it's negative polarity, it's also transequatorial, meaning it's along that ecliptic plane that this high-speed stream of solar wind is flowing, low density, high velocity, and the magnetic field extends all the way out to Earth. Now Jupiter, again, this Jupiter Cazimi is important. It's at 5.2 astronomical units or so. It's 180 degrees opposite. The inward flowing electric current that travels along the ecliptic plane, which is orthogonal, 90 degrees, to that magnetic field vector, it spirals around multiple times before it actually goes from the location of Jupiter to Earth. So just because Jupiter's on the other side doesn't mean it's not affecting the Earth. It also has that perfect gravitational vector at this moment in time. It's a gravitational heavyweight. So you have this inward flowing electric field, which is cutting through Jupiter first before it eventually spirals and hits the Earth. And then we have this perfect connection with a coronal hole on the sun, immediately delivering that energy and information exchange to the sun. And that's all going active right now. And we have the new moon. Again, that statistically significant connection with greater global seismicity around new moons and full moons. It's about 0.5 to 1% on the global scale. But when we look at high magnitude earthquakes, they typically cluster around the new moon or full moon phases. So that's interesting. It's not guaranteed that we have something bigger coming our way, like a large magnitude earthquake, 7, 8, 9. All of these things are in the realm of possibility. Talk to the Japanese residents that felt the shaking of the 9.1 back in 2011. So these aren't fantasies. Or the 9.2 in Alaska, 1964. Or the 2004 earthquake. Or the 1960 earthquake in Chile. So we have the potential for some significant earthquake activity. And at this moment in time, we have these earthquake swarms in Japan, and we just had that 6.3. We can look at that one right here. The depth right now showing, according to USGS, is 10 kilometers. That's kind of a default value, but a lot of earthquakes do kind of go around that zone. We also just saw a 5.8 here near the Dominican Republic at a depth of 2 kilometers. So this also just occurred. We just had a 6.3, 5.5, and 5.8 in about an hour. This is 11:58, that's 11:58, and that's 2:45. If we go to this 5.5 there, you see that that is not the same location as the Philippines, but they ruptured at the same time. But often you have to be careful with the USGS map, because if they rupture at the same time, sometimes they pin the energy on one to the other, but they're far enough away that they likely did not make that mistake. So 6.3, same time as this 5.5, and now this 5.8 there, Dominican Republic, in an area that also has been experiencing an earthquake swarm for years now. This is the Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic area. So we kind of don't know why we have this earthquake activity low grade around Puerto Rico, but this has been active for years at this point. This is getting interesting. That's a very shallow earthquake at 2 kilometers depth. So that is, I mean, that's not like a 6 or 7 or 8 or anything. You don't typically get a tsunami from a 5.8 or 5 magnitude, right? But it's very shallow. So that's interesting in and of itself. And that just occurred. So you're seeing this live, folks, my analysis of this. But this 6.3 just happened. And if we go up, I'm going to show you these earthquake swarms, okay? So we're going to start with the North Island, because this is actually what has been going the most. And we're actually going to go a little bit further back in time, because there's been a lot of magnitude 6 activity around Japan recently. Let's set our map for only showing the earthquakes on the map. And we'll set this for largest magnitude. We see this magnitude 6 that popped off on the 21st. This was at 21:23 universal time, a depth of 18 kilometers. That also followed a 5.9. That was on the 18th of June at 2300 universal time. So nearly the same time in regards to the time of day, which is kind of interesting. And then we see 4.9, 4.4, 4.3, 4.2, and USGS doesn't list all the earthquakes. If you go to the Japanese meteorological site, or the seismic network, one of these seismic network sites for them, you'll see all that. We'll check Volcano Discovery. They typically have a better map for looking at these lower magnitude earthquakes. But then you also notice what's happening down here south of Japan. So you have this seismic energy radiating through Japan on both sides continuously, because it's a swarm. You have a lot of release of energy with a magnitude 6. Let's say you have a magnitude 5 earthquake, and you have a few of those. That's 132, it's about 3% the energy, you could say. A magnitude 5 is 3% the energy release of a magnitude 6. So you have a few magnitude 5s, and you still won't even get close to the energy release from a magnitude 6. Let's say you have a magnitude 7 or magnitude 8. You can do the scaling out. We'll open up the earthquake calculator in just a little bit to get a sense of this. So a lot of people look at these swarms or magnitude 6 saying, oh, well, that released a lot of energy on the fault. Yes, it is releasing energy, but if the stress threshold is at that critical point where it actually needs to rupture as a magnitude 8, let's say, A magnitude 5 is nothing. It's like a mosquito and a hurricane. It's not doing anything to release the energy on that fault. It'll be like 1/10,000th or 1/100,000th the energy because it scales really quickly. So here we see this earthquake swarm. We see that the largest earthquakes are these 5.1s, 5, 4.9. We actually have a video showing this. So check this out. We have this video showing about 180 earthquakes, and it's now out of date. So there's been more since then. But more than 200, maybe probably even more than 300 at this point registered. But a lot of earthquakes registered in Japan from this Tokara earthquake swarm. And Japan gets earthquake swarms. It's one of the locations on the planet that does get earthquake swarms fairly regularly, which is interesting. We also get that in the Aegean Sea, a few other locations. But we see this one to the south, and then we see to the north these higher magnitude earthquakes like this magnitude 6 and magnitude 5.9. Less intermittent, smaller magnitude earthquakes, but again, as I just laid out with the scaling, this has been more energy release, you could say, overall than, or just seismic energy just going out than from the swarm. But the swarms are interesting because it's a continuous kind of pulsing of energy out. So there are those dynamics, and that longer temporal period of energy being released from a swarm is kind of interesting, and I'm sure it has its unique dynamics. But let's go to Omni Calculator really quick, and I think I already have it basically set for earthquakes. I just want to show you, let's say there is a magnitude 8 coming. At some point there's going to be a magnitude 8. We haven't had a magnitude 8 earthquake since August of 2021. Typically we get one every year, so we are overdue for one, and that's why these space weather conditions are interesting, because at this moment in time we have the earthquake space weather, you could say. Perfect for doing this, and that Jupiter Cazimi new moon influence as I described. So you couldn't get better planetary geometry, and you couldn't get better space weather conditions for a big earthquake to go off. You really couldn't. Not saying it's going to occur, but it's interesting. So here we're going to type in magnitude 5, okay? And we're going to look at our energy in megajoules, which is about 2 million megajoules, okay? And you can also remember, we're going to round up because it won't matter. 500 sticks of TNT, all right? Now let's go to a 7, okay? Now we're talking about 476,000 sticks of TNT, or 2 billion megajoules of energy, okay? So dramatic increase. If you go to an 8, 15 million sticks of TNT. So you can see how, let's say there is a magnitude 8 loaded up, or, you know, we had that 9. So Japan is capable of 9s. That 500 sticks of TNT compared to 15 million, it's nothing. You're not releasing any energy on the fault if a magnitude 8 is loaded up and ready to go. You're not averting that, you could say. That's important to keep the scaling in mind. We bumped it to a 9. Now we're at 476 million sticks of TNT, or we're talking about 2 trillion, I believe that is. Yeah, 2 trillion megajoules of energy. So you can see with our earthquake calculator that these smaller earthquakes, if there is more energy ready to go, locked and loaded, these small earthquakes aren't dissipating and reducing that ability, but they could be a warning signal, because we've seen in Japan earthquake swarms before high magnitude earthquakes. Just recently there was an earthquake swarm, just like a couple years ago or so, we had an earthquake swarm, and then there was a 7.5. So that these dynamics do exist. Now I want to show you our synoptic map. I'm going to show you 2 synoptic maps so you can learn to read the space weather data yourself. So here we have our solar terrestrial activity report. This link is linked in the video description, as are all the data feeds I use. I always encourage you to do your own research. I'm hoping to really teach you how to look at this data, read it, and make up your own mind. I'm not someone to just tell you what to think, because that is not the direction we need to go as a species. So here we have our solar synoptic map. So you can learn to read this yourself. You'll see a few interesting things here. Let us go full screen on this guy. And so here we have, again, our map, we see this coronal hole here. This one's about 24 hours out of date now, maybe a little bit more. So we'll look at the most recent one that was just also published by NOAA, but this one looks a little nicer. So we'll start with this one. We see these two big sunspots right there underneath the coronal hole as well. These are areas where the magnetic field is really strong as well as the electric field, and the coronal hole has this open magnetic field. So these magnetic fields are looping back in really strongly. The field strength's like thousands of Gauss. Then the magnetic field there is open, meaning you can sometimes have that strong loop connect to the open one, and then you get this release of energy like that. So these could be, they haven't been explosive yet. They've actually been the solar flare activity, and basically the explosive activity on the sun has been very low for the past 3 days. The most recent significant flare, really significant, was the 1.9x class flare that was less than a week ago. So that's still very much like, you know, just basically having occurred from up there. But in general, for the past 3 days, activity's actually been very low. But that could change, and it's going to soon be on that Earth center meridian. So keep that in mind. That's why I'm mentioning that. But we're more focused on the coronal hole with this report as it relates to these earthquakes and you know, that prophecy for July 5th is kind of interesting. Again, not saying that's the case or it's going to happen, but it's interesting. I just think these things are interesting. This is my channel, so that's what I present. So we see this coronal hole, we see the sunspots, and if we go to our other synoptic map, which is provided by the Space Weather Prediction Center by NOAA, you'll see that they have it labeled as a negative polarity one. So I can open this up in a new tab, I believe, and I will turn off the zoomed in display capture so we can see this. So they do these by hand. Some of the people that make the synoptic map use a digital program, but they release them every 12 hours. So you can go to the synoptic map, see the latest one for yourself, and it'll be up to date within 12 hours. We see this negative polarity coronal hole here. You see the sunspots, but they see that right there, that it's labeled negative. If that's a positive polarity, it'll be labeled positive. So you can start to understand these dynamics. It's the negative polarity ones that connect well to Earth because of the Earth's positive polarity. So this is already expected to connect to our planet pretty nicely and to supercharge the solar wind. And we don't have the solar wind data showing that connection yet. We can look at our real-time solar wind provided by the Space Weather Prediction Center. We see that our density for the plasma has gone up now. It's about 3.5 or so. Sometimes during these high-speed streams, it really goes down even below 1. We see our interplanetary magnetic field there is right at normal values. The 6 is right, you know, average is about 5, so it's right there in the normal zone. We see our velocity, this is key, is only about 430 kilometers per second. These high-speed streams can get up to 600 kilometers per second, 700, 800 kilometers per second for that solar wind. That has an influence over the Earth geophysically. And we see that our geomagnetic volatility now for 7 days has been flat. So we have not been in any sort of elevated geomagnetic activity for 7 days, and the high-speed stream has not connected to Earth yet. So it has not connected. We'll see that connection reflect here in probably less than 24 hours, because again, if we go back to our real-time view of the sun here, this is for the past 3 days, we can see that the coronal hole approaching the geoeffective position, which is right about here. It's not exactly in the center because of how the solar wind spirals out, but it's right about there. And you'll notice that this one was still growing. Look how the center fills in from the beginning to the end of the video. We do get a little bit of explosivity right in the center, but look at that. It was much bigger, and then we get this coronal material to go away. So it's been expanding exactly in that equatorial zone, which is meaning that there's an active growth of that coronal hole high-speed stream. It's likely going to hit us pretty strongly because of that location. The one thing that's working against that is that we just were in our solstice, right? We just had our solstice. We're coming out of that right now. Of course, the solstice period, the equinox periods, these last for a while, and there is a connection between there being a greater inflow of energy from the solar wind into the Earth magnetosphere and plasmasphere system during equinoxes and in the month after equinox. So that would be March and April, and then also September and June. That effect is amplified during solar maximum, which we are in right now. It's when there's more solar activity like these sunspots. These are a key factor for solar maximum. The magnetic field is flipping. It takes time. It's about a 3 to 5 year process for that field to really kind of flip. It's actually closer. You have solar minimum where the magnetic field is nice and stable for about 3 years, and then you have a 3 years where the field starts to become unstable on the ascending phase. You have 3 years where it's really chaotic and unstable during the maximum phase, which we are in right now. That's going to go through 2026, and then we'll start to descend down and it starts to find its new polarity and really lock that in during the ascending phase. So we're in solar maximum right now. We have a lot of solar activity, and we see this coronal hole growing, and it's going to hit us with that high-speed stream. I think NOAA is forecasting a G1 impact from that. I would not be surprised though if we see G2. These are different levels. It goes up to 5. And so a G1 storm is the most minor of geomagnetic storming, but we do have all the levels below that, which are basically like they call it active and then even quiet. And then we have minor, moderate, strong, severe, extreme for the different levels. But if you go to our solar wind prediction, it should be showing us a coronal hole high-speed stream impact on this. They last updated it actually just a couple hours ago, so lucky us. We see this high-speed stream impact right there. So we see our solar wind velocity goes up high, stays elevated for a while as we travel through that high-speed stream with the low plasma density. Notice how the plasma density is really low here, just showing like 2 to 3 particles per cubic centimeter. This is looking on the ecliptic plane down. This is looking south-north for both of these. So we see that high-speed stream like that. So looking like a really pretty critical convergence. As someone that tracks this a lot, as many of the longtime viewers here know, pretty critical convergence with that Jupiter Cazimi, that new moon, and the electromagnetic dynamics of the solar wind and the solar system overall, how that all interacts with the Earth, with that coronal hole high-speed stream now having a really strong magnetic field connection directly to the Earth. We know that coronal hole high-speed streams are connected to earthquake activity, and they're really well connected to earthquake activity with the highest magnitude earthquakes. You basically get every time, for the recent record, okay, we wish we had 10,000 years of data or 100,000 years of data. Our space age is very, very fresh. We only have good data like this for going back to like, you know, the 60s, maybe the 50s, but some of these records here, for example, you can go to data. The official archive goes back to 1972. Skylab was put up in 1973, where we got some of our first images of this. So we don't have, you know, the longest data set, but for what we do have, and with modern seismic measurements, every time there's been a big earthquake, I'm talking magnitude 8.5 or greater, there's been a coronal hole right here or closer to center on the sun. Every single time. Big one too. So there is a significant connection between these. And if you study into plasma physics a little bit, it's pretty irrefutable, but there isn't much actual, like, you know, official research on this. There's quite a lot of these papers, but in terms of like one universal theory that really elegantly explains it, we're not there yet. We probably will be there in 10, 20 years, I think, based off of a new plasma-based understanding of the Earth and the Sun and the cosmos. But we have this magnitude 6.3 that just hit the Philippines. We have these earthquake swarms near Japan. Let me set this for 30 days, okay? Because as you'll see, we've also had some other earthquakes here. Check this out. We'll put this for what we see on the map. Here's a 6.0 north of this swarm. Then here's this 6.0 that occurred on the 21st. This is a 6.0 that occurred on May 31st. And you'll see a whole bunch of other lesser earthquakes as well. In general, they follow the plate boundaries pretty clearly. We see our earthquake swarm down there. But in general, a lot of earthquake activity. Of course, there's always a lot of earthquake activity in the Ring of Fire. But if we zoom out and we do list earthquakes only shown, we sorted by largest magnitude for the past month. This 6.3 there is right up there, tied for second place. The strongest being this earthquake in Chile, I believe it is. Yeah, Chile. And then 6.3 in the Kermadec Trench, 6.3 in Colombia. We discussed that on the channel. That was a very interesting earthquake, We have some anomalous resonances in the Schumann resonances, some weird signals there, and then this 6.3 just recently with the Philippines. So yeah, this zone is looking very active. I'm watching it very closely, especially with this new moon Cazimi combo, which is taking place. If we use Western Tropical Astrology, we can actually load up our Western Tropical Astrology map. Just another tool in the toolbox. Not something to just, 100% ape into, you could say, but it's interesting, it's useful. I have found it fairly accurate if you're a little open in your mind and in your interpretation. We see that's all happening in the sign of Cancer. And we're interested with Western Tropical because it's tracking the seasons. These are not the constellation positions, it's the signs based off of the seasons. We just had Solstice, keep in mind. But this is happening in Cancer. Cancer is the ruler. The moon is the ruler of Cancer. So we have Jupiter and the sun now under the influence of the moon, and the moon is about to move in and conjunct them both at the same time with that new moon on the 25th of June, which if I give you the exact date and time, that is 10:31 a.m. Universal Time on the 25th for the new moon, and it's 3:16 a.m. Universal Time on the it's 3:16 p.m. Universal Time on the 24th for the Jupiter Cazimi. So that's less than 24 hours away. You'll see also a lot of planets here in Aries forming a square to that. Let's just check out quickly solar system scope so we can understand the other planetary geometries that are active, because that's quite interesting. And it's very easy to see. Look at that alignment that we have between Mars, Mercury, Venus, Ceres, the dwarf planet, Saturn, and Neptune. Here is Jupiter there on the other side. This is set for today. If we zoom in, we'll see that our moon is coming in into that new moon position. If I scroll a little bit forward, we'll see both of them click in. Oh no. Oh no, we've really zoomed into our planet. We love our planet though, but we don't want to be that zoomed in. And actually here you can see what it looks like with kind of like realistic scaling. Makes it kind of difficult to read the planetary geometry when they're not at their inflated sizes here. But this is a wonderful application, solar system scope. We see this planetary geometry really nicely. Basically a grand cross, which is a very tense geometry. And it's going all the way out from Mars to Neptune in this angle. And then we have Earth and Jupiter holding up the other end. And you'll think, oh, what about Uranus and Pluto? Those are important. Well, they are. They are in a trine configuration to Mars and Mercury, and in a 60, that's 120 degrees, and a 60 degrees sextile configuration to Saturn, Neptune, and of course now also Venus and Ceres moving into that as well. So the entire thing is a grand trine with these, it's a kite with these, and it's a grand cross with Earth and Jupiter and the rest. So everything is in a connection to each other in terms of the angles. It's really rare to have something like that where you get a grand trine, grand cross, and kite all at the same time. So really wild planetary geometry, and that is, and also the archetypal astrology is indicating some sort of connection to water, the tides, the moon. Jupiter makes everything bigger, more bombastic, so it's an energy amplifier in the sign of Cancer, water, which is the domicile of the moon. So some very interesting things occurring at this moment in time from a variety of perspectives, scientific and beyond. No tsunami warning, I don't think, for the 6.4. It also would have likely already hit if there was. So we hope that's not the case. We hope there's been no serious damage, but 6.4 is quite significant. I don't have good data to show you whether that's the case or not. It's too soon. Typically it takes like 12 to 24 hours to get kind of these updates and videos from these earthquakes. If you look at our past 30 days of sunspot numbers, you'll see that we are in kind of a low phase of the solar maximum. Eventually we are going to go to solar minimum. So we are in that, eventually we're going to keep going down. But we were at 100, then we dipped down here. We had a little bit of a bump up. Now we're back right about 100, a little bit below. And in general, we see these earthquakes connected to solar activity in the fact that you have more of them during solar minimum. And it seems that the connection is that the sun loads the earth with energy, and then when that loading phase is over, that's when the earthquakes pop off. So you get a lot of loading during solar maximum, and then it's more during the descending phase and solar minimum that you get the earthquakes. It's probably through a plasma mechanism. Again, you get all this plasma loaded into the earth, and some of it then eventually comes out once that maybe osmotic gradient flips the other way. That's at least something I'm thinking, considering. It makes sense to me, but I keep my mind open to all the explanations and possibilities. But we are in a little bit of a dip right now. So we have had a lot of energy loaded in, and then maybe perhaps because we're in a little bit of a dip with these perfect conditions for powerful earthquakes based on the space weather and the planetary geometry, everything's kind of coming together, and we do have July 5th. We've had more Orfish wash up. I reported on that in that live stream, which I'll link in the video description. There was 2 more Orfish that washed up just a couple days after that. So it's been like 6, 7, or 8 of these Orfish, which are from the deep ocean. And they are, according to Japanese myth, they are pre-earthquake signals, basically. They're called doomsday fish. And so they are herald of like big earthquakes or tsunamis. And one of the scientific explanations for that, I'm not saying this is the case, but you get these electromagnetic fluctuations before, during, sometimes after earthquakes. So you can have radio frequency emissions from a earthquake fault zone up to like 6 weeks or even months before. You can get dramatic air conductivity changes above the site of a rupture in the hours preceding an earthquake. We've observed that in California. We've observed these electromagnetic emissions in California, also Japan. You get changes in the Schumann resonances. You get ionospheric disturbances during these sort of things, before, during, and after. And so one of the mechanisms is a changing electric field. If this electric field gradient, because the conductivity is going up, all of a sudden dramatically strengthens, and you're an Orfish swimming down there, and probably have pretty good electromagnetic senses, and then the electric field gets really strong, that may stimulate you as an Orfish to come up because you literally just can't stand it. Then you depressurize and die. So that's one scientific idea that I've thought of as to how you could explain these Orfish to come up. But a whole bunch of them washed up before that magnitude 9.1 in Japan. And then there was one research paper that came out showing that there wasn't a connection between earthquakes and Orfish. And so a lot of people say, hey, we had that paper showing there's no connection. But this legend, myth, whatever you want to call it, goes back hundreds of years. And that data frame that we have for Orfish is very, very narrow. So if we were, let's say, God dumped the full data file on our desk with all the information, there very well perhaps could have been a very strong connection and correlation back 300, 400, 500,000 years ago, but we just don't have that information now, and therefore we can't include it in our data set. So our current data set, based off this one research paper, one researcher, keep that in mind. You generally want a whole bunch of these things to start making kind of claims, but one research paper was like, oh yeah, we don't think there's a connection, but it's very limited in the data set. And we just, in general, if you keep your eyes open, you see this stuff. And so we've been having a bunch of these Orfish wash up around the world, 3 in New Zealand, 1 in India, 2 in Mexico. And I think there were just some ones that happened recently, but I was a little too busy to look into it specifically. But I did see like a headline for that. So, I just saw a headline for that. I do want to keep that, my reporting very accurate. So that is what's happening right now. Some significant activity. Again, I've been your host, Stefan Burns, geophysicist, space weatherman, and more. I'm interested in what's happening with the Earth energetically. I hope you join me for that journey. Do a lot of really deep research into a variety of subjects. Today, for example, I did not at all discuss the connection that this has to our health and our wellness, and even like our spiritual evolution. That's something I do discuss on the channel. I find that very interesting. I think there's a big spiritual wave that is coming through over the next 50, 100 years. And in fact, the prophecy that was given by the Japanese lady for this seismovolcanic event in between Japan and Philippines, which is in her vision, she saw it creating new land. She also said that after this destructive event, that is what triggered people's consciousness to raise up and for us to come together globally. So that is very interesting to me. If you want to learn more about that July 5th prediction, then definitely click the video right here. I've been your Stefan Burns. Thank you all so much for watching. Wishing all of you well. Smash that like button to help the channel grow. Subscribe. We're on the road to 500K. We're at 333,000 right now. So thank you all so much. I'll see you all in the next video.